We are live. The Sunday, sort of, MMA show. I'm sure it's still Sunday somewhere, though it did start at 12:02 a.m. my time, so technically it's Monday. I've been jonesing to do a damn live stream. I had to do it. I had to fit it in. I appreciate everyone who was able to make the time to spend some time with me. I appreciate that. Hopefully everyone had a good weekend. Kind of a strange weekend after so many weeks in a row with pretty big UFC cards, several really big UFC cards, seemingly more topics coming out of them even than went into the events. And this weekend we had PFL and Bellator, and I'll be honest, I used to watch every single Bellator fight. And when PFL started, I intended to watch all of their fights as well, assuming that they would be using a lot of fighters I'm familiar with, which that's largely true, but also that, we get to see development, and eventually the ones that were most successful would come over to the UFC, and then we'd be able to see their origin story, so to speak, in real time. And Bellator, just was always, maybe most of their cards don't quite stack up with the UFC, but particularly when I was getting more and more sort of obsessed with the idea of fighting in MMA and all the things we talk about here, and Bellator, was a fairly big part of that. I'm talking mostly the Bjorn Rebney era. So in a sort of a strange way, or an obtuse way, I was looking forward to an unencumbered weekend where both promotions were putting on ostensibly championship fights. Bellator had Mousasi versus Slater, and that was an actual championship fight for them. And the PFL were in the semifinals for several of their weight classes. And I'll be very interested to know what everyone's take on both of those events were. How often you watch major promotions that aren't the UFC. There's also ONE FC, which I've really never gotten into. There's some sort of a barrier to entry for me, and I think part of it is the head, was it Chatria's name? He's just a little too slick for me, and I don't like being sold a narrative. If a narrative develops, or if you want to spice up the narrative that's the most true but add a little embellishment, well, I'm fine with that. And I can get into almost any combat sport if I feel like I'm being treated as the fan or the observer, if I'm being treated with some degree of respect, respecting my ability to cut through the bullshit. And it just seemed like with I just said it, Chatri's organization in Asia, it seems like there's a lot of things going on, and when I catch highlights, and they do a really good job with their PR of the second tier major promotions, I think they do the best job on social media. In fact, I think they do a better job than the UFC with actual, if you want to call it, viral marketing. And so I've been a little more enticed to jump into watching that promotion. A little bit of it is that the events go live at a time that's not convenient for me, although that's not the biggest hindrance. I don't often watch events in real time anyway because of my schedule. But all the tomfoolery where they say they're fixing the weight cutting issue, and people are so desperate, fans and athletes alike, to fix the weight cutting issue, that they're not critical at all. And it's so clear that they're not actually doing that. They're not, now maybe they thought they were going to with the system they put in place, but because of the way they structure their organization, they're not actually, they're not putting pressure on the weight cutting system because you don't have a backlog of contenders. So each division isn't really stressed, and their business model seems to be, we have 2 or 3 notable people in each division, or at least that's what we're going to hope to do, and we're going to push them, and we don't need any more. And most of what I like about MMA is seeing the best compete against the best, but also watching the progression of somebody that comes in with the unlikely story, with the unlikely background, and they have success. And sometimes they take it all the way to a championship, like Israel Adesanya did. That was completely unlikely what he was able to do, coming from a kickboxing background and then being able to weave his way through contenders and perform the way he did. To me, that there's nothing in sports that compares with that story arc, if you want to put it that way. But to get over to the PFL and Bellator, I was excited to watch it, but it ended up being a little bit funny. Well, Bellator was just a flat disappointment, and I'd been checking in on them periodically, maybe every other event, or if somebody very specific was fighting, I'd make the time to watch it. And the way I watch is I like to watch the whole card, which is part of the reason some of the other promotions I just don't. I'm kind of an all or nothing person. So if I'm going to watch a little, I really pretty much have to watch it all. I don't know if that's OCD or what that is. And Bellator, you can't watch their undercard. It's gotten so bad, in my opinion. You know, when they have guys coming in, and I feel like when you book scrubs on an undercard, and then the other half of your business model is you maneuver things so you create stars, and then you book them against the Washington Generals. So of course they're going to win. Now what's sort of become, I wouldn't call it hate watching because I don't hate Bellator. I root for Bellator. I have some frustrations, but it's only because I want to see more major organizations being successful and getting things done, you know, making the entire sport more stable and sustainable and healthy, better for the fighters, better for the fans, all of that. And I feel like with Bellator's business model right now, which I'm not even sure that they really have one, and that's something I'd like to discuss with you guys as we move forward. When you have an undercard with guys that they had a couple debuting fighters in the curtain jerker this weekend. And I'd never thought about it this way, but how does it affect the morale of the rest of the guys on the card, say the main card, when they see two dudes out there, they're probably making, what, 3,000 and 3,000, 5,000 and 5,000. We know Bellator does not pay very well. And they're making their debut, yet they're a part of a broadcast contract, and they're not really getting any sort of payment that would reflect that status. And to me, what's worse, because I don't mind taking less money to get an opportunity that I can turn into something bigger. I mean, that's really what life is about, especially when you're young, when you're just starting out. But Bellator doesn't develop talent that way. They never bring those curtain jerkers up through the ranks. They identify guys like the Ed Ruths and what was the other dude's name this weekend? Was it Franklin? It was a heavyweight, big guy. He was 3-0, and he was facing a guy who was 15-0. But God knows where he got those victories, because he didn't seem like a dude who was ready for even that level of competition. No offense to the gentleman. I think his name was Everett. His first name, actually. And had Everett beaten, let me get his name. I've got it written down here somewhere. Where is it? There we go. Yeah, Everett Cummings versus Devon Franklin. And Franklin may be a prospect. I can't remember which coach was with him, but I thought I saw him with an established team. So maybe the dude's a prospect. But Scott Coker and company, they've got to bring him in against a guy with this inflated record. And again, no offense to Everett Cummings. The dude seemed like he wanted to fight, but as soon as the bell rang, he took one low kick. Actually, I think it was sort of a teep to the knee, or maybe a push kick to the knee, a la Jon Jones, and Cummings was pretty much done then. And you could tell the ref was so ready to jump in, because everybody knows what the score is. This guy's brought in to lose, and you'll never see Everett Cummings again. Or maybe one more fight if there's another semi-prospect they can use a 15-1 record to prop up. And my point, as I was thinking about it this weekend after watching the events, this isn't a benefit to the guy who's supposedly getting the boost. Now, I'm very skeptical, even to the point of cynical, about Devon Franklin. I don't know anything about this dude. He went out there and handled his business. He didn't do anything wrong. But Scott Coker put him in a position where he couldn't win. If you care about authentic fighting, the dude couldn't win because he finished his opponent about as quick as you could hope to. And in that limited amount of time, he didn't show any obvious or glaring holes in his game. But how could you when your opponent doesn't even throw a single strike back your way? And it really drove the point home to me that Bellator is creating a toxic environment for their fighters over there. The prime example would be MVP. I felt from the beginning when Coker launched the welterweight division tournament and put a big cash prize just on that one tournament, not on the other tournaments, but just that one. It was all designed to make MVP fight potentially at least a semi-decent opponent, because he flatly refused to. At least it seemed that way. And I don't think MVP is a guy who's afraid to fight other guys. In fact, he did step in there against Lima. He got knocked out, but he looked good, very competitive, and dangerous, up to the point that he made a mistake. Well, of course he's going to make a mistake. He doesn't know how to judge risk because Scott Coker's kept him in a goddamn bubble. And I don't want to start the show out on too much of a negative note here, so I won't go on and on about all the things I was thinking with Bellator. Maybe we can pick it up later in the show. I've got all kinds of notes on it. The PFL, though, I found pretty interesting. I watched some of their events off and on. It was difficult to find them on television because I don't have a television. I have to get everything from streaming or YouTube TV or something like that. And I wasn't able to find PFL for the first year or so. I mean, you couldn't even download it, borrow it from a friend on the internet. It just wasn't any, it just wasn't out there. It wasn't popular enough to even be pirated. But the actual structure of their fights and their bookings, I do think they're trying to do the best they can. That they're trying to build something. And their fights usually are pretty decent from what I've seen. Particularly since they don't have a lot of depth. They do seem to be somewhat trying to build from within, or at least hoping that as fighters are in their ecosystem and are making regular money, that they're able to develop. And I think that's a legitimate way to go about it. I like PFL's commentary team, and Bellator has just gotten worse and worse with the commentary. I didn't realize how bad Big John McCarthy was going to be as a commentator. Pretty bad. And Jesus Hernandez says Bellator, 1FC, PFL, they grow talent for the UFC. You know, they used to. But Bellator doesn't anymore. Yeah, a few guys have come over, but I'm trying to think, particularly in the last 2 years, not a lot of talent flowing back the other way. In fact, it seems like the UFC has been using Bellator sort of like a knife to scrape the dog shit off their shoes. So whenever they have somebody who's popular enough that they should get another contract extension, and they have enough talent, like a Phil Davis or a Ryan Bader or Rory McDonald, but they have a style that either they're in decline, like Rory seemed to be, or if they have a style that doesn't make for entertaining fights and doesn't grow the culture that the UFC has been steadily trying to cultivate. We see the results of it at 125-pound division. The UFC was able to offload Demetrius, got rid of 3/4 of the division, brought some of them back, and now the division's pretty exciting, way more exciting than it ever was under Demetrius. And the 125-pound division for men was about the only division that looks like the Bellator business model, where you have one guy on top. He's not really popular with anybody in a outside of the bubble. Well respected, great fighter within the bubble, of course. And Demetrius had a style where he was stymieing the development of other talent in the division because it was such a shallow division. Guys were getting on a run of, sometimes just one win, but 1 or 2, 3 wins, and bingo bango, Bob's your uncle. Now you're fighting Demetrius Johnson, who's one of the most technical, proficient, and efficient fighters we've ever seen. Yeah, it's crazy. And it's not Demetrius's fault. He'd say it all the time. They don't pay me to take risks. I get paid when I win. I can respect that. I think any of us would do the same. You got to be true to who you are. And I felt Demetrius always was. In the long run, he had a hard time that he wanted the benefits of being a different kind of fighter, but he was unwilling to be that other kind of fighter. And, I think any of us can fall into that trap at times. So I'm running through some of the comments here. Nate G says he's got to work in the AM, but it's worth suffering. I hear you, brother. I've got an appointment in the AM myself. Jon Jones is the GOAT until he loses. If he wins the heavyweight belt, I don't see anyone coming close for it. No, if Jon somehow gets that heavyweight strap, already, I don't know who. Well, Jon's in the conversation with GSP and I would say Anderson Silva. I don't hold his losses towards the end of his career against him, because Anderson was never trying to win at all costs. Look back at the Bisping fight, or the fight with Chael's buddy, the guy from Japan. I don't know why I can't remember his name. But there are a lot, Damian Maia, of course. It was always about some sort of internal aesthetic for Anderson. And a lot of that had to do with, it's part of the way he protected himself. He only put himself out there when he put himself out there in a way that he was comfortable with. But he was so dynamic and so dominant in a very good weight class against a very diverse set of contenders. I'll always think Anderson's got to be in the conversation, and Jon's right up there. The only reason you'd knock him out would be because of the PEDs, and to me that's a different discussion. I think it's legitimate, but a different discussion. Yeah, and Kingsley says that's if Jon wins it. I don't see him beating Ngannou or Gane. Boxing defense is way too impenetrable these days. Yeah, I don't see Jon, and I've said this many times, I don't see Jon taking on Ngannou. Just not going to happen. Gane, on the other hand, I think Jon would go for that, because Cyril isn't the big one-hitter dude. He clearly has power, and I think we've only scratched the surface of what the dude can do as far as working techniques together and being dynamic in that way. I think he's going to get more dangerous as he proceeds. But Jon's the thing that has made him hesitate throughout his career is the dudes with the big power. So I'm going to turn this over to the phone lines. If you want to call in, go ahead and do that. 206-276-8384. Give me a call and pick a topic, and we will run with it. Another thing I was thinking about the PFL was on the production side, and let me know in the comment section some of what you're thinking as far as the Bellator and PFL stuff. It seems to me they've got way too many decision makers, too many middle managers or executive producers who have all these ideas. It reminds me of when the NHL went to Fox, and they had the glowing puck, and they had all these graphics, and they tried to cram all these stats down your face. I can guarantee that Keith Peterson was not happy the other night with all the tomfoolery of wearing some sort of mechanical glasses so that he can pick up, so he could have a camera in his glasses. Just not. If it looked good, at home on the television, that's one thing. But of the 5 or 6 fights that I saw, not good. Not good at all, with the way those glasses worked. Hello, caller. You are live. What's your name and what are you thinking? Oh, hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. There we go. What's your name and what are you thinking? You're live.
Hi, my name is Sean. We actually talked after the McGregor fight.
Oh, hey, Sean.
How are we, Alpaca? Basically, I called again to talk about Conor. Have you seen his tweets tonight?
No, I didn't see tonight. I was working all night until just before the live stream.
Let me go. Let me go to Twitter.
Sure.
He said something bad about Bisping.
Oh, jeez.
Yep. So let me go to it.
As you're finding that, I don't know if you heard the Chael piece when he was talking about there's basically 4 and then ended up being 5 voices that are relevant in MMA, and one of them was Bisping himself, DC.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it makes me wonder, okay, now if he's going after Bisping, is Conor just going down the list and trying to offend?
Yeah, no. So basically, he did an Ask Notorious, and a fan sent him a question saying, Bisping said DC would pick you limb from limb in person. And then Conor quote tweeted it and said, Bisping is a nobody on Sirius XM. Rushed back to competition after being dropped and strangled, then gets shotgun slept by Gaston Loeb's left hand. Devastating. Even though I collect commission on all his fights, I still said to his team to pull that last Gaston fight. I knew it was coming.
Wow. Yeah. I don't
He's losing it.
Yeah. There's 2 levels to this to me. One is the judgmental level, like just the obnoxious nature of what he's to me it's tone deaf.
Yeah,
what
100%.
You just said, that he's losing it, and I think what he's lost is the ear of the fan. Not just that fans aren't listening to him, but he used to have such a good perspective when he would talk about the rest of the MMA landscape, Conor. And it was always exciting when he'd give you some of his insight about different fighters or different divisions. And it seems like he's really lost touch with what it is to be a fan. And I don't know if he's just obsessed with the position he's in. He can't get over the fact that he lost a second time, regardless of what excuses he's making. The excuses don't seem to be giving him any comfort.
I know. It's just, I said it after the third Poirier fight. I actually called in. I said he should retire, because the way he was talking in his post-fight interview, it doesn't even seem like he's fighting for the right reasons anymore.
No, I don't think he knows what the reasons are exactly.
Exactly. He's talking about, like, after the third fight, eating Dustin out in the parking lot. Like, that was just disgusting, man. And the tirade hasn't stopped. I think the worst part of it all was saying that COVID is good and father is evil. That was just disgusting. That was a next level low blow. And I didn't have a lot of respect for Conor.
Right.
But at that point, it was all gone. Any tidbit of respect that I had for him, for being the double champ and doing what he has done for the sport of MMA, it all went out the window with that tweet, because it was it's so out of character for him. He's just trying to get that rematch with Khabib. He's just trying to get on Khabib's nerves enough for you just get a reaction, and it's just so sad. What he should be doing is going back to the gym. And honestly, I think it could honestly be John Cavanaugh and Owen Rowdy. Those two could be the voices in his ear that are just making him go crazy, because I feel like they tell him everything he wants to be heard. They don't assess. They don't assess the fight in like this deep analytical, like, we need to get better here, Conor. They always think, well, this could have happened, and Conor was doing well in this, and it's just, you don't need to think about that, especially off of a lawsuit. Like, you don't need to talk about the things that you were strong in. You need to talk about your weaknesses. You need to improve upon your weaknesses. And it feels like Conor's coaches don't do that for him. and they spout into his ear that he is the greatest of all time and that he's double champ McGregor and he does whatever the fuck he wants. But in all reality, at this point in time, the guy hasn't won a fight in 5 years. Or actually, he's won one fight in 5 years.
Right.
Against Cowboy Cerrone, against a guy who lost to Alex Morono in his last fight. Like, McGregor is...
Yeah. I think I'm not sure how much latitude Conor's coaches really have with him. I think it's, quite honestly, I think they should probably go to Al-Anon or one of these groups where it's for the people who have loved ones who are addicts. Because Conor has such a narrow psyche.
I agree.
And when it's the right place at the right time, it's magic, both inside the octagon and when he's doing media. But
I agree.
You get it off 1 or 2 degrees, and it's a shit show. And I think he's such a specific person. He's never really listened to anybody unless he trusted them. But then that only went so far.
Yeah,
so
and I mean...
Even with Rowdy and Kavanaugh, and I like Kavanaugh real well, I think he's a thoughtful guy. I think a lot of your concerns are Kavanaugh's concerns as well. But if you were the parent or the brother of an addict, at some point you have to realize just the act of trying to continue to help him is enabling his bad behavior, because you're never, what, are you going to use logic? Conor is a smart guy, but he's not acting like a smart guy. He's acting like an addict. All he wants is the thing he wants. And right now, what I think it is, quite honestly, it's not the fame per se. It's not the money. It's the greatness.
Exactly. He was at one time the double champ, and he was the guy who did whatever the fuck he wanted. He stepped in the boxing ring with fucking Floyd Mayweather, and I mean, he had no business being in there. Let's be real.
No, he really didn't. He I think he made a pretty good argument for himself by being in there. I would have loved to have seen that fight if it was just 6 or 8 rounds. Now Floyd has to fight to go try to go 10 or 12, or I guess it was 12. That was crazy. But again, that's Conor's mindset. He doesn't need somebody to tell him he's the greatest. So I don't think that aspect, a lot of what you said I agree with, the aspect that his coaches are feeding into his ego, I don't think they are, because Conor doesn't need that. I think Conor doesn't even have time for other people to tell him he's great. But I do think he wants the power, that feeling when you are the greatest at something. Any little comment he made sent shockwaves through not just the MMA world, but the sporting world. And he doesn't have that.
He doesn't have that anymore. And honestly, like, I know you disagree with me on this, but I do think as somewhat of a McGregor fan, because I don't know where I actually sit in this. Like, I want to root for the guy. You know, the guy has one of the most bubbly personalities in the entire UFC. And, like, when the guy is, like, grounded in reality, he's one of the most entertaining and just thoughtful guys that there are on the entire roster. But what I want to see him do is go to a coach like Firas Zahabi or like a I'm trying to think of another really good head coach, like a Ben Thomas. You know what I'm saying? Somebody that's not going to, you know what I mean? Like, they haven't been through that double champ status. They haven't been through that ride with Conor. They know what Conor is, but they haven't been on that ride like John Kavanaugh and Owen Rowdy have. So they're going to be more grounded in reality and just telling McGregor straight how it is. Like, you were the double champ at one point. 100% you were one of the greatest. But let's look at you now. Over the last 5 years, what have you done? You've beaten the Cowboy Cerrone. You've lost to Poirier twice. You boxed Floyd Mayweather, and you got your ass handed to you by Khabib.
Yeah, but that's all logic. See, we can talk what logically Conor should be thinking, but he's not thinking that way at all. And certainly an outsider telling Conor all of his deficiencies isn't going to get him motivated. I think of Trevor Whitman would probably be the best coach.
Yeah, Trevor Whitman would be great.
But there's no way Whitman would work with him, not just because he's with Justin Gaethje, but I don't think. I mean, Whitman, he's a really savvy dude.
And I think his morals are in place, man. I think his morale's in place. I don't think he would work with Conor, just seriously looking at the way that his career has gone. Look at the way, like, the way his mental has almost ruined his career.
Right. What's in it for him?
Honestly, it's not Conor's fighting skills that have ruined his career. Obviously, he has holes in his game. Like, I think last time after the Poirier fight, I was big on the cardio issue. You know, he definitely has some leg kicking defense issues. Like, he can't check kicks for the life of him. And, you know, he has some holes. But besides those holes, what he's good at, the counter strike, the foot movement, like the footwork, you know what I'm saying? He's just one of the best in the game. And it's so sad to see all that footwork, all that talent still be there, but it's just shrouded away by the mental aspect. It's just shrouded away by the mental side. He thinks of himself too highly, and he gets in that octagon, and he overlooks his opponent every single time. He thinks he's going to get them out of there. I mean, like, you heard it in the presser. He thought he was going to take Dustin out on a stretcher, and he was the one that was taken out on a stretcher. I mean, it's really ironic. It's really, really ironic and telling of just, like, you know, what Conor's career path has been. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he
gets in there.
Hold on a second, Sean. Conor was mystical.
At one point, Mystic Mac.
He did see the future in the sense that he saw the possibilities. And he saw possibilities because he was attuned to what was going on. And now his ability to observe, well, his real problem is orientation. He doesn't know where he should be looking. And that's a much deeper subject. That's something I have been writing about, thinking about with Conor, because he has such a specific psyche. And it is somewhat ironic because he was so good at seeing, and now he can't even see what's in the mirror. And that is a perfect thing.
People were asking him during the presser, you know, Mr. Mac, what is your prediction for the fight? And he said in vague words, he's going to leave on a stretcher.
Right.
And what that said to me was, I can't visualize the way that I'm going to get him out of there like I used to.
No, I thought a similar thing. He was not so much hedging his bets, but I felt he was trying to avoid falling into the traps that he's fallen into in the past when he's lost. Like you said, overlooking. Yeah. If you remember, he didn't do his signature move when he's being announced right before the fight, where he walks to the center of the octagon and throws his arms out a la Jesus and, you know, kisses to the fans and basks in the applause. He didn't do that in the second Poirier fight. And there were a lot of little things like that. He didn't bring his family with him this time. And any of those individually could have worked. And I think because he's tried so many different little orientations with each fight, and each fight has still gone badly for him, I think he's lost.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the long
What do you
short
think
of
next
it.
for him?
Well, he needs to shut the hell up.
That's for sure, 100%. The drunken tweets are just too much. They're way too much. And it seems
it's
like they're
keeping
every
him in
night.
the news, but it's not building the brand. It's killing the brand.
Exactly. I mean, the DC thing was like, what, a week ago?
Right.
Tonight he has the Bisbing thing. 2 weeks ago, I think, or maybe there might have been 3. He had the COVID is good, father is bad thing. I mean, it's just every other day on this dude's Twitter. He needs to, not only does he need to call someone out, but he needs to do it in a crude and disgusting way.
Right. Well, that's the desperation. He's got to take it to another level. If you don't have content, you really only can change the volume. And so now he's frequency and volume. So he's putting out a lot more content, and he's turned the volume up to 11. So
100%.
I don't as far as the future, he could still get it together for any given fight.
I think he could. I think he could.
A prolonged run. Well, quite honestly, if he has one really good fight, it will affirm the positive things that he has been doing. Not
100%.
publicly, but behind the scenes, his training, changing up his training and all of that stuff. But, and you know, there aren't a lot of wrestlers. Makhachev's really the only one at the top of the division right now, and Makhachev is not Khabib.
No.
Conor would never have beaten a prime Khabib. Khabib isn't going to come back, though I do believe at least that's what I thought Conor was doing with most of his more evil tweets, because they were, aside from the BS he talked about Poirier's wife, all the other really heinous tweets were in some way connected to Khabib. And to me, at least I understand that. Like, he is trying to get Khabib back. And this would be smart, because if he makes Khabib look weak, not with us, not with the Western audience, not with the English-speaking fan base, but with his own people, then Khabib will have to come back to beat Conor. And Khabib...
I agree.
I don't think Khabib... I don't know if you've ever quit a job that you never really wanted to have, but you had to have.
Yeah, no, I just actually did that at the beginning of the summer.
So, to me, that's how Khabib, his retirement seemed to me. That he knew he was retiring too soon from an athletic standpoint. He had a lot more he could do. He could have really cemented his greatness, but that wasn't as important as moving on to the next stages of his life, which is what he'd been groomed for his entire life. Wasn't for the fighting. The fighting was the way to, it was the on-ramp to the freeway, and the freeway is being political, helping his people, with all of his charity stuff as well, and his business stuff, having fighters, and you can tell that Khabib is loving it. He's into it.
Yeah, no.
So if Khabib had to come back, we would not see a prime Khabib. He still would probably beat Conor, but it would give Conor a shot. And if he came back, it might be a one-off fight. It doesn't disrupt the belt. They could do it in 6 months. So from that angle, I can see why Conor is hitting at DC and why he's doing all this other stuff. But it doesn't answer all the other questions. And I think honestly, that goes back to Conor just being desperate.
Yeah, no, 100%. Honestly, the fight that I would like to see next for McGregor, honestly, I would have to see him out of the top 5. I don't want to see him fight a top 5 opponent. But the guy who's ranked number 6 was a top 5 opponent, was a guy that's been in names to talk with him for a while. And I think a perfect fight to match up Conor to come back with would be Tony Ferguson. Because Ferguson himself is on a 3-fight losing streak.
Yeah.
He needs a win badly. And that, stylistically, is a good fight for him. I'm not going to say that he wins it, because obviously, his boxing defense is a little suspect, and he gets hit a little bit too much.
Right. We don't know where either of those guys are. We don't know which guy's going to show up for either of them.
Exactly. And I mean, if the best version of Tony shows up, I would have Tony. If the best version of Conor shows up, I would have Conor. If the best version of both of them show up, I think I would lead in Tony. But I don't know if the best version of both of them are going to come out. You know what I'm saying?
Right, of course.
But either way, I think for one of them, I think it's a good step back towards the title.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Jon, and I appreciate the call. Call back again for sure. You always bring up a lot of good points and get the ball rolling really well. For me, if I'm booking Conor, and this is assuming he comes back healthy with the leg and there's no setbacks like there's been with Weidman, we need somebody to get Justin Gaethje off the schneid. Apparently this dude is waiting for a certain kind of fight. He's not going to get a title shot. Not after waiting this long. There isn't enough push for it. Particularly since there's so many other fun fights and just interesting fights for Gaethje. It's not necessary. So let Gaethje take care of McGregor, He wins that fight, then that puts him right up at the top. After this would be after the fact of the Poirier, after Poirier has his shot at the title. So the division needs to move on, and I would like to see it move on with Justin Gaethje. Tyler Durden is a stupid name, says Nate Diaz is always there to fight, and that's true. At least that's the conventional wisdom, and that's what I've ascribed to for the longest time. I kind of get the sense that Nate doesn't want that Connor stink on his next matchup. Nate's really been banging the drum to fight Poirier, and Poirier is pretty smart to encourage that. That gives Poirier more options if he doesn't have to go right into a title fight. Let somebody else fight for the title. And Poirier could take on Nate. And that was always a strange one. That should have been a good fight. Or I assumed it would have been a good fight. I certainly was anticipating it. And both guys, in their own way, seemed to be trying to weasel their way out of it. Now, for Diaz, he pretty much always sounds like he's about to pull out, but I don't think he ever really has pulled out of a fight. And Poirier had that injury, but then he never really got it fixed. Yet he's still fighting and now looks better than he's ever looked. So who knows about that? That was also at a time when Poirier's mindset was a lot more fragile. He's really solidified that. Of course, winning doesn't hurt, but I think he's done a lot of good work. Well, particularly his foundation, which is a real foundation, and he's seems to be pretty hands-on with that. He and his family and his wife and himself doing that. Okay, looking at some of these questions. I am taking calls. I know there's not a ton of us. I didn't assume there would be going on so late. And we don't have to go all night. But, oh, yeah, I do want to thank Go Flamingo. Sent me $10. I appreciate that, brother. He says, Jones lost rounds 1, 2, and 5 against Santos. Lost to Reyes and should have been disqualified against Smith. Fighters shouldn't be put in a position of sacrificing pride or money. Yeah, I would disagree, but it's just my opinion that I thought Jones narrowly won the Santos fight and also the Reyes fight. But to me, they were both close enough that it's like I don't have a problem with anybody thinking that Jones lost. The one that I thought Jones really lost was the first Gustafsson fight. And the only reason that I don't hold on to that with some sort of crazy resentment is Gus didn't really try in that 5th round. He thought he had it iced away. And I know that's not how judging should work. I thought Gustafsson had already won the 3 rounds he needed. He should not have needed to win that 5th round. But as far as the MMA gods, they don't like dudes, especially contenders, to take the foot off the gas in that 5th round. That's just the way it works. And to me, that was a revelation, seeing Jones dig deep. And even Chael will talk about this in the odd moments where he gives John a compliment. He says, there aren't that many truly gifted athletes, sort of transcendent fighters who also have crazy heart. But John does. He has a lot of pride. And for a guy who doesn't... John has thin skin, but he doesn't have thin skin the way really uptight guys do. It's weird the things that John will let slide. And then he'll get offended just completely outside of himself about some minor thing. I still don't even know what the whole Luke Thomas issue was. What Luke said something bad about you on a radio show, why are you even listening? If the guy isn't, if you're not happy with what he's saying in general. But I can't imagine a dude at the pinnacle of his sport caring what some MMA media dude says about him. But maybe that's part of what makes Jon great. I don't know. That could be part of it. The other part of the question or comment from Flamingo was Smith shouldn't have been put in a position of sacrificing pride or money with when Jon kicked him in the head, or kneed him in the head rather. Yeah, no, that was a sour moment in the sport, and it's difficult to overhaul the rule set so that it still has enough flexibility to encompass all the possibilities in a sport that's as complex and as many different potential instances could happen without having hard and fast rules. So much of what happens in the cage that's up to the ref, it's up to the ref's discretion. And that's much more a positive than a negative. Of course, when it goes wrong, it really goes wrong, and we all hate it, and we should. To me, that's just an indication that we need to put pressure on commissions so that they're hiring and supporting and nurturing both their judges and the refs, because particularly the refs, it's the most difficult job by far. Brad Earthman says, if Nick finishes Lawler, is he a title contender? Why? Are they fighting at 170? I didn't see that. I think they are fighting at 170, and no, yeah, I don't even know if Nick wants any part of the whole title thing. That would bring way more media obligations than he's probably going to want to take on, but it certainly would set him up for some really nice fights. I could see if Nick has one or two really nice outings, would anybody be surprised if Israel Adesanya didn't become interested? To me, that's the exact kind of thing, because Izzy could play both sides of that. On one level, it should be an easy fight for him stylistically, because Nick is so flat-footed and doesn't really like to cut off the ring, and he can. It's almost a principle for him that he doesn't. But Izzy also is a fan and a bit of a historian of all combat sports, and even all the anime and whatnot related to the whole fighting anime stuff. Not my area of expertise, but I see that through Izzy. So I think he could have a lot of fun with a Nick Diaz matchup. That would be weird. But yeah, I think maybe an actual title shot might only be 2 fights away for Nick Diaz. I never really thought about that. So good question, Brad. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's at 170. Yeah, I don't think Nick would have to even have a fight at 185 to at least start entertaining the idea of fighting Izzy. And it would be up to Izzy, of course. And he's been such a workhorse for the organization. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm just saying, of all the wild-ass ideas, that's something that could come out of it. Eric Willis says he thinks Nick is going to gun for Masvidal if he beats Lawler. Yeah, I think the accepted wisdom is the Diaz brothers don't like to cross streams. They each piss in their own pot. And Nate's rivals are his own. But I agree with you, Eric. I think if he has enough success and he's feeling comfortable, and that's probably the more important thing, if he's found a more grounded, acceptable way to deal with the media and the obligations on the the backside of having a fight, if he's comfortable with that stuff and his life is in order, why not? Why not go after Masvidal? It doesn't seem like Nate's going to get, Masvidal's lost a little steam after losing the rematch to Usman, particularly the way he did, that's not exactly fair. Masvidal, he wasn't ready for something that he didn't think was a possibility that could happen to anybody. And that's certainly not to sell Usman short at all. That was mastery. That was next level from Usman. Again, a nice tip of the hat to Trevor Whitman. He's really taken Usman. You can tell what a good student, what a good worker Usman is. It kind of piggybacks on what I was talking about in the last live stream with Usman, that he's not a guy that likes to really be in the forefront. That's not what his personality is built for. So you put a good team around that guy. And I've long said that Henry Hooft is a bit of a strange bird. He can get good performances out of guys, and I think he can get fighters to a certain point. But his track record, it's kind of shown. A lot of guys go through those doors and then end up coming back out, and there's usually a nice bump. I think what he does is Henry can instill a real work ethic and a bit of a edge to guys who either don't quite have an edge or lost it. I think that's what he did for Rashad. Rashad lost his edge, particularly as his athleticism began to abandon him, and he had to rely a little more on just toughness, and that was difficult for Rashad, and I think Henry Hooft was able to provide that for him. But really getting down to refining not just the techniques, but the strategy. I don't think those crazy tough Dutch dudes even have any elaborate strategies. Pretty much beat the hell out of the other guy before they beat the hell out of you. And there's something certainly entertaining about that style, but it makes any given matchup too much of a toss-up, particularly if you have guys that are really, really at the top of the division. Gogo Flamingo says that 2 fouls should be an immediate point. No, I'm with you. That's a level that the commissions could pretty easily refine without the danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. One of the things I was thinking about, and I can't remember specifically which fight it was, but it was within the last 2 weeks, and it was an eye poke, and all you hear are the commentators and then everybody on Twitter, well, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't intentional. Who cares? Of course it wasn't intentional. And I've mentioned this aspect before. Pretty much Uriah Faber versus Jimmy Rivera is the only fight that I'm very sure was an intentional eye poke. And some fighters allow themselves to be a little loose with their fingers, and they don't mind, like Jon Jones and even Cormier. It's sort of, if you don't bend a rule, you're not really trying. That's one thing. But Uriah Faber, it was so intentional. But outside of, but it didn't get called. How can You have to be so far inside the mindset of the fighter in the moment. I don't think you can be in the octagon and make that determination. So if the majority of the penalty is weighted towards intent, and yet 99% of all, particularly eye pokes, are unintentional, but groin strikes as well. If they're unintentional, then why even have that as part of the rule set? I think just taking the wording out, the whole intentional thing, I think you have to look at impact, not trying to be some sort of doctor and prognosticate how much it's going to affect him moving forward. I've heard Anik suggest something like that. In a perfect world, that'd be a great way to go about it, but it's just not practical dealing with just regular people being refs. We're not talking about supercomputer AIs that have the ability to factor in unlimited data in a millisecond. You can't see everything all at once. You can't think about everything all at once. So I think if it's you can pretty much always tell, like the old idea of it's difficult to define what pornography is, but you know it when you see it. I think instead of talking about intention at all, just have the word something like egregious, an egregious or significant foul. And part of it would be how hard the technique was thrown, how reckless the technique was. Is it one of these things, some of the groin strikes, it's mostly the other guy's fault. The guy who gets kicked, it's really mostly his fault because he was moving when the other guy started kicking. So to me, that's not egregious. And pretty much anybody watching that can see, okay, yeah, it's just one of those things that happens. But if a guy is nibbling around the groin area all night and he's getting close and he's been warned 2 or 3 times, and then he drives one home and is a little bit reckless about it, sort of like he doesn't care, he knows he's not going to get a point taken on the first time he nails him. Yeah, if you call it egregious or if you call it significant, then if you get the verbiage right, you clear a path so that judges, or not judges, but refs feel they have the authority to impact the fight. You know, doctor's oath is to do no harm, and a ref's oath is don't impact the fight. You know, first thing, don't impact the fight. Protect the fighters, but don't impact it. And it's going to take time and really careful wording within the rules to help refs see that whole system differently. And just, it's not your fault. If everybody knows, and it would take maybe 3 or 4 events. If they call it consistently, if you really go to town on one of these fouls, and certainly the second foul, it's just got to be over at that point. Just, take the penalty, or, take the point away from the guy. And quite honestly, a lot of times they'll even themselves out. You got to go back to old school hockey. A lot of times the refs would swallow the whistle because guys were being a little dirty with each other, and they would only tighten up the rules if things started to get out of hand. Well, if both guys are getting a little out of hand, as often happens in fights, then it's not that hard. If you've taken 1 point, you're probably going to have an opportunity to take a point from the other guy as well. So if they become a lot more liberal, it's not so dramatic. But it's not an easy thing to fix, that's for sure. And I am taking calls, and we know the phone works this time because Sean called in. Don't make me beg Sean to call back. What's more commercially lucrative fight for Dustin Poirier in the UFC? A pay-per-view title fight with Oliveira, or a non-title pay-per-view with Nate Diaz? I don't know. something about that matchup doesn't, and I mean the Poirier-Diaz matchup, it could change. You get a little bit of, you get one of them doing an interview and then they get some interactions, that could change. But to me right now, they're both sort of B-sides. Because Diaz is coming off the losses. And Poirier, quite honestly, I think even though from a pure sport aspect or angle, he couldn't be any more respected than what he is right now. I think half of the MMA community sees him as the de facto champ. I don't, because that would be disrespecting Oliveira. And I think the guy is really good, and I want to see what he can do. And so I certainly don't want to dismiss him before he even has the chance to go on some sort of a title reign. I think Poirier also has a little bit of that Conor stink on him. Conor muddies the water enough, and Conor has so many casual fans, or whatever you want to call them. I'm not a big fan of that term, but like a non-MMA fan, but they like Conor. And that kind of momentum sort of bleeds over into Conor's opponents. It's not that big of a deal when Conor wins, because he sort of cleans it off his opponent and he builds him back up with his words. Well, Conor losing to Poirier both times and making excuses for himself, while most of us aren't buying into those excuses, enough other people are, that I don't know how well that pay-per-view would do. I certainly would rather see. I don't know why Poirier wouldn't want to fight Oliveira, although I think it's a very tricky fight for him. He can't fight Oliveira the way he has fought Conor, that's for sure. Because Oliveira is so much more dangerous, not just on the ground with the jiu-jitsu, but standing grappling. So Poirier's had so much more success in his recent fights not getting into brawls, because he's been able to, when he can't control space and distance with his striking being effective, or with his movement, if he gets in too close, he's been able to control or slow down the action to his own liking with the grappling up against the cage and all of that. And then going to the ground, he's always had a little bit of magic on the ground from time to time, that's for sure. Dangerous guy, but that's not anywhere he wants to be with Oliveira. And Oliveira's been going on all cylinders. He's dangerous. I think he has more one-punch power than Poirier. Or at least he's able to create endings with his strikes. He may actually end it on the ground, but he's able to disrupt his opponent with the striking much earlier in fights than Poirier's typically been able to do. Poirier, as he says about himself, he's a dog. That's how he wins a lot of his fights. Eric Willis says the fight he wants to see is Conor versus RDA on the same night as Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson in a 5-round fight. Yeah, that's the fight that the MMA gods took from us, and that might have changed the entire course of events. Now, I don't think Conor was going to be beat in I was going to say I don't think he was going to be beat on the run he was on, but he lost to Nate and then barely beat Nate in the second fight. So Conor was open to being disrupted, that's for sure. RDA had a lot of the skills that you'd like to see if you were looking to beat Conor at the time and now. RDA's pretty well. I'm not saying he's shot, but he's put in a lot of work, and he's fought everybody, and people have pointed that out, and RDA deserves all kinds of credit. Is he just one of the few guys who doesn't care about his own back end, the business, the financial side. He just fights dudes. His fight with Tony Ferguson, he took so much damage from Tony. Tony destroyed him. And that was at I just had a call, but here we go. And that was at Elevation, Mexico City, too. And he was able to ride that out. You are live. What's your name and what are you thinking?
Fernandez. Hey, Alpaca, thank you very much for what you do, man. I appreciate it, as does everybody else in the chat.
Thanks, man.
Last time you were talking about cutting down trees so you can get a better signal.
Yeah.
I think the last time you were back of a library.
Yeah, I'm in a hotel tonight, so I'm still trying to figure all that stuff out.
Nah, it's all good. My question is, why do you think these younger individuals, like there was that one fighter that got that $50,000 bonus and she started to cry and she just pretty much had her emotions on her sleeve and said she was broke.
Oh yes.
Knowing that, is it just the thrill of getting to that upper echelon as far as the belt or the notoriety? But you know you're going to be broke. You know it's an expensive sport.
Yeah.
And all the trauma, CTE that you're going to take along the way, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because everybody thinks they're going to be Connor or a Masvidal.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, some of us got to be stepping stones. And that was my question.
Yeah, that's the hard reality of life right there, what you just said. Some of us have to be stepping stones. And at least in regular life, you can kind of pivot. You have a few bad weeks at work or whatever, you can always reapply yourself, or you can move laterally to a different job. But fighting, ruthless. Yeah, I think a lot of dudes, they just don't even think about losing. It's not until they're almost out the door, whether it's within their first 10 fights or after a long, successful career. It's not until the very end that they realize just how much damage and how difficult it is.
Wow.
I think, I know at least for myself, that I can pretty much put up with anything if I think I have to do it, and I believe that I can see a future that's going to be better if I go through it. And that's, I think, the rub with fighters, because there's no athlete more respected than a fighter, and we're now in an era where there's no fighter more respected than an MMA champ, because we know they have to go through so much more than any other fight sport. So there's always going to be that allure, and some people are just born, or at least have developed this passion. They want to test themselves, and they want to be the best. And that's why we watch. You know, we wouldn't watch them if they were, you know, great plumbers. We might hire them, but, you know. So, yeah.
Now,
go ahead.
no, man. Well, thank you for everything you do, and
Absolutely.
I love your content, man, and I love everything that you put out. Any chance we might get some new uploads?
Yes.
As far as
I've been trying to get a hold of Cavassier. He's not an easy newt to get a hold of, but I think I've got him circled.
you got him cornered.
I think I got him cornered, and I'm going to put him to work. Thanks, brother.
Hell yeah. All right, man. That's my time. Thank you very much. God bless. Have a good one.
God bless you. There we go. Another good call. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's the truth, though. I've been trying to hunt down Cavassier, and I've found his track, and he'll be in studio pretty quick, and we'll get this thing back on the track as far as getting uploads, because that's the heart and soul of the channel, what I want to do. But I've talked to you guys about that. I like doing the casual stuff as well. And Jesus, I put a lot of crazy time trying to build up the ecosystem for doing the live streams. I started a whole new batch of programs and learning that. I'm not using it tonight because I just wanted to be able to go on without some crazy setup. But yeah, I'm putting in the time. I'm basically all the time that isn't allotted very specifically to other things into building up the infrastructure so that I'm doing this regularly, and I'm super excited to do that. I'm glad you're along for the ride, and I appreciate the input. A couple more questions here. Yeah, Brad Earthman says, if he's with Gogo, if a fighter commits 2 fouls, he should have special circumstance. It should be special circumstances not to take a point. Yeah. Another thing is fence grabbing. And I know we all harp on that, but if we could just get it through a ref's head. And I think really what it is the refs don't feel the support from their commissions. And the commission hides their officials from the media. So part of that protection is understandable. You don't want your officials to have to take all this abuse, but they're also denying their officials an outlet to exonerate themselves or to explain themselves and to get feedback. I mean, that's the whole reason I do the live streams, not because I think it's as good as the episodes or anything like that, or to replace it, but I just want the interaction. I want to know what everybody's thinking. I want to be a part of something that's not in my own head. I've got enough voices in there. I prefer, it's good to get actual voices from other people going back and forth. So if you let a Mark Goddard Jesus, I would love to have Keith Peterson in an interview. In fact, he'd probably be in my top 10 interviews if I was, which I am working towards doing an interview type situation. It would be more film documentary style interviews, not podcast type stuff. But still, how great would it be to know something about Keith Peterson? Who knows anything about that dude? And yet, I do believe he's a top 5 ref. And if the average ref or the prominent refs felt that they could come out and build relationships with some of the more prominent members of the media, particularly with ESPN, and you got to be a little bit careful with that because you don't want a sense of impropriety. Too much familiarity breeds a more casual attitude, and you do need the ref to occupy a unique place because they're the complete authority as soon as the fight starts and until it's done. Pretty much nobody else in the world has any control over that fight other than them, unless it's just really crazy circumstances. So let them have an outlet. Allow them to talk to the media a little bit. I'm not saying throw them in front of the usual gaggle. I mean, half those guys wouldn't even know a decent question to ask. But I think it has helped the times a few of the different refs have gone on Rogan's show. I think I've seen a marked improvement, no pun intended, in Mark Smith since he went on Rogan. He let the world, and I didn't listen to the whole, I only listened to a little bit of it, but that's a pretty interesting dude, Mark Smith. And I think he feels more comfortable in the octagon, like he has more solid footing. If you weren't one of the top 2 or 3 refs, I get the sense that you're always feeling like you could be out of the rotation at any moment. And now you're lucky if you're getting Bellator shows. When, of course, everybody really wants to, the major leagues, you want to be in the octagon, and that's understandable. So, yeah, I think they need to call more penalties and the whole fence grab thing. And recently, refs have been a lot of hand slapping. On occasion, I think that works well. Keith Peterson does that pretty well because he's quick. Probably because he's so little, he gets right in there, just slaps a hand, and it saves him from having to give 17 warnings. What was it with Herb Dean a week or two ago, where he'd given a guy a warning, and I don't remember which fight it was, and he said, anything else and I'm going to take a point. And then he didn't. Because, of course, as soon as you say that, every parent knows. You can't threaten your kid with something unless you're willing to follow through. And when you are the sole arbitrator, like a parent is, all you have is your word. And as the ref allows certain things to go on, Chad Dundas has the exact right philosophy about this. He came up with his whole Dundasso fighting style, where you're going to get away with at least one groin strike, so plan it and do it and make it count. Why wouldn't you? And there's some. I felt Derek Lewis kick Gane in the groin intentionally in their fight. I guess that'd be another example of an instance of a foul that I feel is actually intentional. Ichmi says, or asks, is Khamzat the next big thing? Yeah. Boy, he sure was. Unfortunately, when he got sick, was so early in this thing, people didn't understand that you truly had to rest, or you would potentially ruin yourself for a long time. The same thing happened to Maynard Keenan from Tool. He got sick and then didn't know it, and he got it really, really early. And he blew out his lungs for apparently 5-6 days into the sickness. And even months later, he was having a tough time. So I think Chimaev could be, but it will depend. If he loses his cardio because of health issues, it's going to be tough for him. He was exciting. When he was really hitting his zenith, I was predicting that he was basically opening the door for Khabib to retire, because Khabib couldn't occupy the same space as Chimaev. Because Chimaev was never going to play second fiddle to Khabib. He has too much pride, and most of the guys from that region do. They know their place. The last caller says, some of us have to be stepping stones. Well, it's one of the reasons I don't think Makhachev is ever going to be a champ, even though he's been able to maneuver himself into the top 5 without ever having fought a single person in the top 15. He's still eventually going to have to fight dudes in the top 5, top 10. And I think he could beat any one of them any single night. But he isn't like Khabib, in my opinion, in that it's very unlikely he's going to be able to put on a string of beating top tier dudes. And I think a lot of it actually comes down to his mentality, that you can't spend your whole life as a bench player, being Khabib's lackey, and then all of a sudden, now you're going to be the man. Could you imagine if the roles were reversed? Do you think Khabib would have just laid back and let some other dude have all the glory? No, Khabib would have been smashing him in practice. Khabib couldn't have, because Khabib was born to try to be great. And I don't think Makhachev has that. He's got enough skills, he could win. But for Chimaev, that dude, he's exciting. I mean, one, he doesn't have to talk during the fight to make it interesting. He actually fights in a way that's exciting, even his grappling is very exciting. You don't have to have a deep knowledge to just feel the ferocity the guy brings just to the whole his whole approach. And now apparently politically he's got a lot of crossed wires with Khabib. And I do think that was part of the reason Khabib stepped away. It just, I don't think, maybe 5%, maybe not even any percent. But I did see it as a potential issue. Because Khabib, if he was going to stay in the UFC, was not going to be able to stay at 155. I mean, he's one of the few fighters who almost did kill himself. He definitely reduced the longevity of his fight career trying to make, and when he did make 155. So going up to 170, I think Chimaev could have baited him into a fight or pushed him in a corner, similar to what I was talking about that Conor's going to try to do. You're never going to shame Khabib in front of an English-speaking audience, but Chimaev would be able to shame him, potentially anyways, in his own language, in his own region, and know all kinds of angles to get under his skin that, a dude like Conor wouldn't have any inkling of, because he's not from the culture. So I think all the angles make Chimaev interesting. If he can come back healthy, it would be fun, particularly since it seems like he wants to cement himself at 170 for a while, which I think would be smarter. It'd be fun to see. I don't think he's ready for a title shot anytime real soon, but it'll be fun to see him go on a run. Okay. Yeah, UFC needs new glove design to help prevent eye pokes. That would be ideal. Again, no pun intended. That would be good. And Trevor Whitman apparently has the gloves that he's designed and made that everybody says are awesome and work great. And the UFC apparently can't make enough money off it, so they're not gonna go with that design. Motley Stew asks, why'd you stop making your body language videos? I just didn't have time. I mean, that's the long and short of it. I wanted to. I work full-time, and I have a side hustle that's almost full-time. And then just some other life stuff. So it wasn't any one thing, and it certainly wasn't that I didn't want to. I mean, I love doing that stuff. And I've been putting a lot of time into working up episodes. It takes a lot of prep, the way I do it. Of course, I don't do it in the smartest way. I know for one of the Joanna and Rose episodes, I did 2 or 3. I can't remember how many I put out. I made 3, but I think I only put out 2 in that series. In one of them, I ended up writing 22,000 words. And by the time I actually made the episode, the script was about 1,500 words. 22,000 words is a novella. It's a short novel. It's just nonsense. And it takes so much time to write all that stuff, because those aren't notes. That's actual writing. It's stuff that's been developed. So I've in the time that I've been away, I put a bunch of effort trying to refine the process. I don't need to generate that much content just to wheedle it down to a manageable 15 or 20 minute episode. So probably the next 2, 3, 4 episodes that come out, and they'll start coming out in the next week or so with Cavassier, they'll be a little looser. They'll still be, way deeper than what I'm able to do in a live setting, but a little looser. And quite honestly, I think those come off better because they're just not so. I think it gets a little confusing for myself as well, when I try to put too much, just too dense, too much stuff. It's not clear. So, yeah, no, I'm working towards getting that stuff back. John Kozak says, hey, buddy, hope your day's going good. Your channel's great. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Some other... Renald Fradi. Apologize on the pronunciation of your name. Good content as always. Thank you. Yeah, Surge Teeth. That's how Father Time works. That's true. I mean, it gets us all. And just talking about from earlier when fighters don't know until the end, till it's too late, just how much they've given up to the sport. And there's something kind of beautiful about that. I'm not trying to be morose or sick, but the whole idea of sacrificing yourself for something. And typically we mean resources, your time, and your effort, and maybe your money, or at least your proximity. You got to stay in a certain place. You make all these sacrifices for what's important to you, but to sacrifice your body in a very real way for glory, that is what men are genetically programmed to do. It's hardwired into us. I think that's part of what is so attractive. I don't think about it in those terms, but I think it's what, when Dana White is saying, everybody understands fighting, it's in our DNA. Well, he meant that metaphorically, but it's literally true that men don't get anywhere, over over the span of time as humans have developed, and many mammalians, particularly primates. You've got to fight for the right to breed. It sounds a little crass, but we like to think of ourselves as so much more sophisticated than that. But, why is it that in the last 20 years, like, all these geeks and dorks are getting some of the best women? They have so many more options. The guys that 25 years ago basically couldn't pay to be with women, where now they're the ones being sought out. Well, because they've got the status. They've done it a different way. And but they've achieved dominance in a different way. The most effective way is to do it in a physical, visceral way, and there's nothing more direct than fighting. As was it Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, one of those gentlemen? Chicks dig the long ball. Well, they love the KO even more, and will do some pretty stupid shit to have the opportunity to spend a little time with a lady you might enjoy. I mean, we are just animals at the end of the day. Matt King says he's sorry he's late. That's all right, brother. This is a ad hoc kind of thing. We had to get it in. I wasn't going to miss the Sunday show if I could stay, if I could avoid it. RF says I should do a duplex monthly show with the Weasel. Your two channels are very different in the MMA landscape and very unique somehow. I would love to see that. Yeah, I like the Weasel. I've said that before. I think I've also said that I tried to put a live. This is before I even did a live stream ever. There were, I think it was the day the Conor Khabib fight was announced. There was also like 3 other fights that were all announced that day, or within a day of each other. Very big fights. And I contacted the Weasel and Mix Mollywop, and we wrote back and forth a little bit. We couldn't get it together, and especially at that time, since we're all anonymous and nobody was doing anything live at that time. So yeah, that's before the Weasel was doing any live streaming. So I understood, and they didn't know me. So I tried to say, well, I have experience with broadcasting, and not broadcasting like television, but film work and interviewing, and we can do it in a way that you're going to be comfortable. But I understood. So yeah, I would definitely do something with the Weasel. I think he's great. I really like what he does, and I think he fills a very important niche in the community. To me, he's so much better. I think I talked about this last week even a little bit. He's so much better and, dare I say, more important than the corporate media guys, the guys that are getting paid regardless of the quality of their content, whether it's by one of the Vox outlets or ESPN. And now that doesn't mean that some of those media dudes aren't good. There are. I think as far as a broadcaster and a guy that gets in front of the TV camera, I think Brett Okamoto does a really good job. I know some people aren't real fond of him, but I think he's about the most normal dude of all the usual gaggle. In fact, I don't even have him in the usual gaggle. I just think he's a media dude. And I like some of the other people. I did think it was interesting, though. I mentioned Chael was saying there's 5 voices in MMA that matter in media, and he didn't mention Ariel Helwani. It seems that a lot of people recently that had worked with Ariel have not been they've not been interested in shining Ariel's wheels, as Chael might say. And I wonder how much there is behind that. And I've been curious to see how Ariel's new show will go. I'm not predicting good things for it because I think he's burned out with MMA. I don't think he wants to do it. I mean, we know that if he could have made money and become prominent talking about wrestling, that's what he would have done. He would have done that from college. That's what he was trying to do. He's got a really great work ethic. He's sharp, particularly on the business side of things. He's, in my opinion, just an okay interviewer. He has as many, not really bad interviews, but he has as many whiffs as he does hits. When he gets the right person at the right time, he has some really great interviews. He has some real special moments. At least he did back when he was with MMA fighting before. But I don't know. I think he's in a weird space. He was a victim his whole life. As a kid, sounds like, getting beat up by girls and the whole 9 yards. I think he's built elaborate scenarios since he was a very young child about how one day he would get his revenge. And he has a very screwed up relationship with his mother. I would love to interview Ariel, that's for sure. Get to use the old Freud line, "Tell me about your mother," because that's a weird thing going on. I don't think he realizes how much information he gives out when he talks about some of that stuff. But anyway, I think I hope it goes well. I'd like to see the MMA Hour return and be what it was. That was really important for the community and for the fighters. Being part of the community, it did a lot of heavy lifting for organizations and for fighters, and just it was great. Doesn't sound like that's what he's going to go back to, and I don't think he's really interested in going back to that. Travis McClellan says, when's the nuke coming back? Very soon. I don't want to say the next couple days, but yeah, very soon. Redcliffe asks, do you suspect any kind of psychological drama beneath the surface layer between Francis, Cyril, and Coach Lopez? How will that play out under a magnifying glass of the title build-up? Yeah, that's a great question. I have been thinking about that a lot, and it hit me the other day of how much happier Francis must be fighting Cyril rather than fighting Derek Lewis. And I think Lewis would have been the easier fight just from a technical standpoint, particularly given how much Francis has improved. But it was such a weird time when Ngannou originally fought Lewis. And then everybody got it wrong, saying that he was afraid to get hit. It wasn't at all. He was thrown off. He was in a bad spot. He thought he was unbeatable, and he was so positive he was going to beat Stipe. He had disdain for Stipe. Not in a personal way. I think he liked Stipe, but there was all these little moments, like right before the big presser they did. They were both backstage, and Stipe's just like, "Hey man, how you doing?" He compliments him on his shirt or something like that. And Francis was thrown off. You could see it right there on the footage. Why are you talking to me? Why isn't, you don't seem to have any friction? Like, you're completely comfortable. Aren't you afraid of me? Don't you know what I'm going to do to you? And I think it's not even so much that he overlooked Stipe in their first fight. It was that he had almost a mystical belief about himself, almost a supernatural. In the one of the series that's going to be coming out, I've been working on a bunch of episodes that kind of fit within this category, and I call it the Psyche series, where I get into the specific psyche of different fighters, and it's usually once they've been in the limelight long enough and they've built up enough of a career. And the first one that I really started working on, this was years ago, it was before his first fight with Stipe, was on Francis. And it's only gotten deeper and richer over time. You know, the guy's really complex and kind of like working a Jenga tower, pulling out all the little pieces and seeing what's in between the gaps. The dude, I think of Francis and his philosophy as one of blood and soil, that he believed because of his genetics and where he's from, that it was beyond fate, that he was going to just destroy guys. And that had been proven correct so many times. And his rise to the title was pretty unparalleled. And the way he did it, that's never happened. Even Jon Jones, when he was having all the success, you could always tell it was so much more technical and creative and not as much just sheer brutality, Mack truck style. Yeah, and particularly with the coaches, because Ngannou left the coach, and I heard on one of Chael's pods recently where he's trying to play this idea that Francis and Cyril are somehow friends, and they might talk well of each other. They were teammates to some degree for a while, but you know, I've not seen any indication that Ngannou has any misgivings about putting severe damage on the dude. And you know he has tremendous animosity towards his coach, or at least he's intimated at that, towards that end of the spectrum. And yeah, it's something I definitely want to dig into further. I think it's one of them. So Redcliffe, that's a great question, because I think it's one of the more interesting things to watch of all the fights that will be coming up in the next 6 months or so. is that dynamic between those three guys. I put more time into breaking down Gane's behavior after he knocked out Derek Lewis as well. I talked about that on the live stream after the fact, but a lot of that was just off the cuff, and so I went back and was looking at the footage because I need to build up a baseline for Gane, because I don't really have a very good understanding of what he is just day to day as he's doing his different things. And you don't know anything about somebody. You can't see a pattern change until you know what the pattern of their normal way of behaving is. He's definitely a very understated guy, but he's not emotionally muted in the way I first suspected he might be. I think it's a little more nuanced than that. The more I've been looking into him, pretty interesting. I'm actually excited to dig a little deeper into Gane. Beyond the proficiency in his fight against Lewis, I was impressed that he was able to flip the switch and go from being so calculated and cautious against Rosenstruck, and then just be so free. He was so free in the fight with Lewis, and creative, and he took chances he didn't need to take. He could have been aggressive without taking some of those chances, and for me that's good. It's less likely that he's going to get trapped in his own success. He doesn't seem, based on that fight, if he continues with that pattern, he's not going to try to protect what he's created for himself. I think he's going to go into each matchup fresh and take it as it is, and not try to establish something he can't. You know, like if in baseball, you strike out the first 3 times, you come up to the plate, and then now it's the bottom of the 9th, and you could win it with a home run or whatever. You can't be thinking about trying to make up for the failures before. You can't get, you can't score 6 runs with 1 at bat. If the bases are loaded, you could get 4, but you can only hit 1 home run per at bat. You can only get 1 victory per fight. And from what I've seen, and now looking back and more closely at Surreal, he seems to be very grounded in that. And he's playful and creative. So yeah, exciting fight. It's one of the, definitely one of the fights circled, that and the Usman Colby fight. Excited for those. The news being cornered as we speak. Yeah, hopefully, and I think he is. Maybe talk to the MMA guru. He's pretty entertaining, and his channel is growing. He has lots of loyal fans. I'm trying to remember if I know him. It sounds familiar. There are several dudes that I check in on. I'm not always good with names. If you had a picture, I would know. Hey, there's Kiwi TV. Good to see you, brother. Channel and Bisbing are okay. But a bit too much of bitter haters somehow, and people sometimes don't like how the writing's a little bit funny. Syntax. The UFC is doing... Oh, Brett. Okay, Brett Okamoto. Yep, that makes sense. Because it's best to present him as an anti-Ariel alternative. Ariel is top. Yeah, I hear you there. Yeah, for sure. Well, and Brett's kind of like a pretty boy. I loved his podcast that he did for ESPN. There was nothing fancy about it, but he gave a pretty good overview of the news. He gave decent backstory, some behind the scenes stuff, without being weird about it or anything. No tattletaling or overly dramatic. The guy's a bit understated. I think he might be a little vapid. That's my guess. But I find it endearing because he's not weirdly throwing his ego in there all the time, and I appreciate. And he's competent, and you just can't say that about a lot of folks in among the usual gaggle. They have one of those deficiencies, if not both. Serge T says, since Ariel left the MMA show, I don't think I watched 5 episodes altogether, watching him crying as I was laughing when he pissed Dane off. Yeah. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw this and decided to stay up. TT. Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. Serge says the same thing, 4 a.m. Yeah, well, Jesus, I guess it's already 2. I was only going to do 20 minutes or a half hour. I didn't figure I'd stay at it for 2 hours, but I appreciate it. Probably wrap it up here in a little bit, but yeah, Gane really opened up against Lewis and tried to get the finish at the end of that one. A Miracle One says, that's absolutely true, yeah. And he was playful from the beginning. He was putting himself out there. He definitely had scurry mode on full alert in that first round. Makes sense. And I'd said after the fight that Lewis should have had that in his back pocket, knowing that he could chase, that he could make Surreal run. And that's the kind of thing that Ngannou will do. And I think it's going to be a completely, well, clearly it should be a completely different dynamic. Because we've seen from Derek, he has as many duds as amazing fights, for sure. Yeah, almost 4 a.m. in Minnesota. Perfect. Yeah, I figured just start the stream randomly. And I said that last week, that I was not going to try until all the other stuff is in place. I'm trying to bring too many things online all at once. So I'm just focused on, okay, when I have a window of time, let me get something done and get it out so we can talk about it and move forward and build things up so they're a little more sustainable. Yeah, if I could do DC in the new, that would be way better than DC and RC. That's been the disappointment. DC's new show, the first episode, the other guy, he's a little bit of a ham hock, but I kind of found it charming. I was okay with the angle that here's DC. We know he's as solid as it comes as far as having a background in MMA and being able to talk about it with knowledge. And so to have somebody who's just a real enthusiastic, fairly long-term fan, that's cool. But I don't think that it doesn't seem to really be panning out that way. Because I've listened, and it's difficult. To be fair, it's difficult to listen to a whole episode. I've tried the last few, and DC's not even as good. Ariel ran the show much better than the way it's being run now. If you just skip the first 8 minutes where Ariel tried to put on some personality, it always goes badly for Ariel when he tries to show his personality. Because I don't think he actually has one. I mean, sort of technically, he's not built up. He has a persona. That's how he's able to leave the house. I mean, pretty clearly, I think we all understand that. He's worked through a lot of things to be able to do. To me, that's one of the more impressive things about Ariel. If you understand just a little bit of how much sort of self-defeating narratives he battles in his own head, I'll always have respect for the dude for that and for a lot of other things. And I don't take it so personally. Yeah, he can be a bit of a jackass, and he plays up the drama, but I figure that that's part of the cost of admission of getting good content from the guy. Yeah, I'd love to do a show, not like a recurring show. Why would DC want to do that with me? But love to interview the guy. Oh yeah, Frittati. Is it Frittati? Ronald Frittati? I don't know. I'm not good at rolling my R's or any of the things you need to do to pronounce a cool name like yours. But yeah, he asks if I've ever heard of the MMA Mexican martial arts. Yeah, no. I do know that dude. Not know him personally, but I've seen it. Yeah, I like that dude or that channel. That's good. It's interesting. There are quite a few. I've thought about putting together not a rankings or a list or anything, but just sort of a list, but not just a list to put out there, because I think there are a lot of people doing some interesting stuff, and it's so random who gets popular and who doesn't. You know, the people who get popular, you can always find reasons like, well, you know, in the beginning they had these deficiencies, but they had all these qualities. But most of that's post hoc assessment. If they had failed, you'd be able to find equally good number of reasons why they failed, or, you know, at least failed to have the success. So I'd like to see more people have more audience. That's for sure. All right. Guru has some good content, but usually ends up doing live streams, which that content is him just being a sock puppet doing impersonations of MMA fighters for tips, which is a shame. Yeah, so I guess it's good that I don't have that talent. I do one voice. I can only do one accent, and it's not anything good. So I don't have that skill. A Miracle One says he doesn't remember ever seeing a heavyweight turn and run like Gane did. No. Well, most don't have the dexterity to be that big. And I think the footing to be able to shift that much weight quickly, I think it would feel unstable, especially for a big guy. And I think, from everything I've heard, the UFC's canvas is much stickier than a lot of places, like the Bellator or whatever. And some nights you see dudes slipping around quite a bit, but most nights they usually have good footing. But that's probably part of the issue. And that's just not how heavyweights roll. They're gonna stand and bang. They're not looking to retreat. And I think it's effective for Gane to do that, but it's not sustainable. You do that, if he does it 2 or 3 more times in that fight, it makes it almost impossible for him to win a close fight on the judges' scorecards. Hey, Brother Ink, how you doing, man? What's up, Paka? Why do you think a good portion of the MMA media has an adversarial relationship with the fans? Oh, God, that's the quintessential thing. That's what made me start the channel. It's just, not that I'm not media, but just being a passionate fan and feeling like there was no place for me to go and almost nobody listened to. One of these days I may do an actual episode on that, because I think to talk about it in specifics I should be not careful, but that I should be accurate. And sometimes just off the top, especially when it's just, you know, us here and not a bunch of people, I feel pretty comfortable just talking off the top of my head. And I have some things that I've thought about, and I have observations, like talking about Ariel Helwani and kind of his issues of self-hatred that he clearly has, you know, to grapple with. But I do have to realize, they're people, and I don't want to just put a bunch of stuff out there without making sure that I put it within some sort of a parameter. This is not fair for me to make assertions or speculate about very personal. It's way more personal than just like reading somebody's emails. You kind of read their mind. You don't have to be totally accurate. You can't be perfectly, but you hit some of those things. It's just not fair to do that. So I want to be a little bit disciplined to do that. But in general, I say all that, I'll still do it. Well, pretty much everybody in the usual gaggle, they have no training to do what they do. So I think that's part of it. They also all have body and speech issues. So across the board, they have all these things that make them feel self-conscious. And I believe they got into doing media for the exact opposite reason that I started doing the YouTube channel, which is they wanted to have credibility over other people. They wanted to become experts because in their minds, and this is just general, but in their mind, since they weren't credentialed, and none of them are, even Ariel, he went to broadcast school. He's not a journalist. Virtually none of them can write, and that's why I don't include guys like Sean El-Shadi or Chuck Mendenhall in the usual gaggle, because those guys are legitimate writers. Regardless, I don't even know what their credentials are. It doesn't matter to me. But I think for a lot of the guys, your Luke Thomases and stuff like that, he grapples greatly with, in some ways, he's very heterodox, he wants to be outside of, cut against the grain a little bit, but at his core, he's a rule follower. He's the most compliant guy. He wants to follow rules, and I think that inner conflict that he's yet to resolve. I mean, I don't know anything about him personally, but my guess is he's got 2 or 3 outstanding things. And outstanding, I mean, they're outside of his core psyche instances, traumas, whatever you want to call them, that he's failed to integrate. And it causes him to be divided. I think that's why he's so polarizing. Some fans, he's their favorite content creator, and he has more hatred than almost anybody as well, which sort of makes sense because he's always cutting in 2 different directions. And in general, the people who recognize that aspect about Luke, a lot will see that as being inauthentic, and I don't see it as inauthentic at all. He just hasn't resolved certain issues, and he's a busy dude. It's difficult, and it's difficult to do that. We're all constantly in need of updating our psyche and dealing with outstanding issues. So why he so directly is adversarial, though, that he calls his own fans donks, and I've had to stop following a big portion of the MMA media on Twitter just because they're so negative. Anything that they can malign an MMA fan or a fighter, they just want to do it, and they create a feedback loop. They feed off each other. So I don't know. To me, if MMA, the sport, and the fandom, if it's as horrible as some of these guys say, particularly Luke, then how do you go to bed at night knowing that you're not doing a goddamn thing to change it, and you're just, what, you're a mercenary? You're going to involve yourself in something that you detest just to make money? And I don't believe that about him. I think he hasn't connected that. I don't think he realizes just how negative he is. Some of the other lesser type, like half the dudes over at Bloody Elbow, I mean, that's pretty simple. They're just very weak people. You know, they're very underdeveloped. So, and completely incompetent. So they take essentially these minimum wage jobs, and the only thing they get is the little bit of power, which is why they ban everybody in the comment section and take pleasure doing it. But it's very bad to put yourself in that kind of a position. If you recognize that something is bad or corrupt and you don't do anything, and it's your environment and you're not doing anything to make things more positive, it has a detrimental effect on the individual. So that's the best answer I can come up with, I think. Jesse on Fire channel. No, I haven't seen that. Is that MMA or all kinds of different stuff? Yeah. A miracle one, yeah. Well, Ariel does have to have a persona to leave the house, and we all have personas. What's funny about talking about some of this stuff, using some of the technical language, is the words have other connotations colloquially. You know, the way we normally use a word like persona, it means fake. But technically speaking, it's not fake. You have a different persona when you're at your parents' house than you would have over at your buddy's bachelor's party. We just don't think about it in technical terms. And somebody who has a lot of fear and anxiety and they can't control it, and they're, hyper prone to emotional feedback loops. One of the things you would learn, and I'm sure Ariel's gone to therapy, and my guess is he's gone to cognitive behavioral therapy, which to me I think is awesome. I think it's one of the few disciplines in regular practice within psychiatry, psychology, that is scientific and pragmatic and very functional. It gives you skills to appraise what's really going on, sort of defeat all of our internal filters, so see the world a little more accurately, and then come up with ways to do the things you want to be doing rather than suffering the consequences of being led around by your pathologies. So yeah, I think Ariel's somebody who should be heralded for that, if nothing else. Yeah, Gane versus Jones would be a good fight. Yeah, for sure. DC would want to do a show with me if he knew me. Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, if you talked to the animated Newt, that would be cool. Fouati? Oh, okay. In English, I pronounce Ronald Fouati. Cool. And Mr. Fouati says, every time Ferdinand Lopez can spit on Francis, he does over and over. Too much ego, if you ask me. Lopez was also the back door to own Jones. Yeah. Yeah, Ferdinand seems like a very interesting character. I don't know how much of a controlling, maniacal bastard he is. Maybe it's zero. But in all the breakdowns I've done where he was working with Francis, it was clear there was a very strange dynamic. I talked about it before, that Francis always had to hurt him. He always had to hurt his coach. But the fact that Ferdinand would take it and the way he would take it, pretty interesting. Not a normal dynamic. So there's more to be fleshed out there for sure. Thank you for giving me the pronunciation. Moth reports to us he has a 4-inch long roach in my room. Well, hopefully it's not the kind with, 6 legs? Oh, any thoughts on Till and Brunson? Yeah, a few. Till is a dude who, intentionally or otherwise, always manages to get himself into the most advantageous fight. He goes by the Chael playbook of easiest fight for the most reward. Chael usually says easiest fight for the most money, but a lot of times what you really want is opportunity. And, Till, what the hell has Till done in the division to be fighting in the top 10 already? To me, he didn't do enough at welterweight to be able to jump into the next division and instantly get these big fights. But I'm not completely opposed to it because, he's a fun fighter and he's an interesting fighter. He's a very good fighter. He's just a guy who, it seems that the accepted wisdom, he's of a certain level understood, and I think we don't understand him. He could be better than what we've seen, and he might not have near the upside that everybody has assumed. So it'll be interesting. Brunson's by far probably the most favorable matchup for him, because if he can't handle Brunson's wrestling, the other dudes in the division are going to be able to grapple Till as well. But that really is Till's secret weapon. It's not been his striking that's won him the toughest fights. It's been his ability to mix in the grappling, and sometimes lean on it pretty hard, which is good. That gives him more paths to victory. As far as the fight goes, Jesus, and Brunson's such a funny dude. He's gotten a little more shine recently with some of his victories. I think it's more of a case that he's being rewarded with praise over the body of work he's put in. Even though he's exchanged wins and losses quite a bit, the dude's put a lot into the sport, and he's, going all the way back to Strikeforce. He's put together a solid resume. The wins and losses, could look a little better, but he's fought a lot of tough guys, and so a lot of respect for him. And it's, in one sense, it's a perfect fight for Till as far as evaluating where he's going to shake out in the division. If he can't handle Brunson, then there's a lot of other dudes he won't be able to handle. And if he can handle them, then, if he can, we'll learn more, because he's either going to have to handle the grappling, or is he going to be able to compromise Brunson with his striking? I don't mean just win a points decision, but can he seriously hurt Brunson? Because Till really hasn't. A little bit like Jeremy Stevens, he built a reputation for this amazing power, but the number of times in recent fights that he's really brought that to bear is, not a ton. Well, I'm going to answer a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up, because it is getting late and I've got not a super early appointment, but a fairly early one. Jesse, grandmaster and founder of MMA, is very funny, pretty spot on. Yeah, I'll check that out. Everybody's giving Moth advice on how to take care of that roach. Yeah. Go Flamingo. The roach is trying to take everything you've worked for. It's true. Yeah, TT says the MMA community is not bad. It's the worst parts that are the loudest. I totally agree. Most people are reasonable across most things, but and I do like to hold the feet to the fire of the usual gaggle, because they're the gatekeepers. They have been, and they're the ones standing between those of us that are passionate about the sport and the fighters themselves. So I think it's reasonable to critique and criticize, because hopefully we're doing it to improve things so that they can improve individually, and maybe some of the systems can improve. Because what really needs to happen is we need outlets that are better. If they paid any money, more qualified people would work. That's why I think there's almost nobody of any real deep competency at the Vox outlets, particularly from the writing side of things. Murani Manuji, that's my attempt anyways. MM says, there are a few MMA fan bases that are toxic. I hate it when McGregor fans go back and forth with Khabib fans for no reason, saying Khabib is running from Conor, LOL, which makes no sense. Yeah, those oil and water, those two fan bases. But that's also easy sort of to pick on them. To me, you just have to ignore them, because you're not even talking about the average McGregor fan or Khabib fan. The ones that are jackasses are just, there's nothing redeeming about them. They're just sort of trolls, not even good trolls. They don't even know how irrelevant their points of view are. So I think it's best just to, I can't even take them seriously. If I don't know somebody, if I don't see, even if they're just on Twitter and I can kind of go back through and see other things they've written, I'm not talking about blue check mark, just anybody. If they make a comment and it's like, okay, and look at other things that, well, are they articulate across different areas of expertise, or are they just an idiot no matter what they're talking about, even if it's something that they're trying to be positive about? And that's what I see with most of the worst MMA fan bases, that percentage of Khabib's fans, when they're saying the most horrible things to me in DMs or wherever they try to find me, it's always the same. It's like the same guy writing literally thousands of the same comment. I can't take that seriously, because I know it's not a coordinated effort. There's just this small percentage of a certain fan base that are absolute rubes. And you have the same thing with the Conor fan base. With that, there's a small percentage that's just not, they're not even worth being upset with. I just kind of feel sorry for them. Silence Rage says, what's up, boss? Hey, man. How much of Jon Jones's talent is going to waste? Well, right now, all of it. Well, I mean, perhaps some of his lady friends would beg to differ, but as far as his public performances in the MMA space, I think it's pretty much all going to waste. I don't know what time it is around your place, but crack that beer. It's to you folks, you gentlemen of the chat. Only got 2 calls tonight, too, and I'm about wrapping it up now. I do appreciate those of you who stepped into this strange After Dark episode. I'll do more of these. They're just kind of random ass, but mostly, as I'd said in the beginning, I'm building up a whole ecosystem or infrastructure to be able to bring way more visual content. It's a little bit difficult to do it with one dude, so that's, I'm trying to build that all in. And to be able to do live breakdowns. I finally found some pretty good programs that I've been working using the iPad and connecting all that in. It's pretty exciting. I spent about 10 hours over the last 2 days working with some programs so that I can actually integrate. I've been looking for years for a video program that would work on the iPad so I could actually scrub back and forth across a timeline of a video and then be able to annotate, markup or whatever you want to call it. So I finally found one that I can do that with and that integrates well with the other stuff. God damn it, Flamingo. I'm getting out of here. And you hit me with $20 donation. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, brother. And that's about the kindest thing you can say. The community is better with me in it. I appreciate it. I'll tell you what, I'm better being in it. Sincerely, it means a lot to me just to do some of this stuff, to get it out there and to interact. That's what it's all about. We'll keep doing it. As I said last week, for the next little while, I won't know exactly when the times are, but when I do post that I'm going to go on at a certain time, I will go on at that time. It might only be 10 minutes advance warning. So find me when you can. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up wherever, I keep my DMs open. So if you've got a more involved question or comment, hit me up there. Also, if you go to Alpaca-thesaurus at Yahoo, that's the email that I'm using now. So I actually want to develop the email thing a little bit. I've got a few ideas just to be able to send some information back and forth. There's so much content that I've created that just isn't structured in a way that I'm happy with enough to put it out, and to do so would take so much more time. There's a lot of episodes and audio content and writing, so I'm thinking about doing maybe a monthly like a monthly email where there would be either links to audio visual content or writing, something like that, and then also make it easy to have exchanges. Eventually I want to find a platform, maybe it's Discord, maybe it's something else, where we can have a community that grows up and we can exchange more ideas. And ideally I would like to be a part of something where people who are interested in developing content creation, whether it's in MMA or whatever, I'd like to help facilitate that and grow that community in my professional life, and both my long-term vocations. I was able to be a part of communities where everybody got to do more. Even like in business, it doesn't have to be that, you lose if I win. If me and the Weasel and Mix Mollywop and a lot of these other people, Crazy Old Mind Smash, and if we all had a little bit of connectivity, make a community that's a little more cohesive, I think we could help create if not an actual platform, create the metaphoric platform to give other people an opportunity to, do their thing. Because I think we all, the more success each person has, should be more opportunity for everyone else. Because really, I'm not in competition with Weasel or Mixed Mollywop, and they're not with me. I think the competition is the ecosystem, whether or not you find your content from independent sources or from the moneyed corporate platforms. And one doesn't have to be bad so the other one can be good. But anyways, all right. I do appreciate it. Matt King, yeah. I was wondering about Australia. Now you say it's 6:55 p.m. I'm pretty sure you're talking about what day? Monday or Tuesday? I know you're somewhere in the future. But anyway, I can never figure out Australia. Because it never makes sense when I look it up. I always think I'll remember how it works, but it never does work out that way. All right, brothers and sisters. We made it through another live stream, and we'll keep this thing rolling. Thanks for showing up. Remember, it's not supposed to be easy.
There is some sort of a harmony. It is the harmony of overwhelming and collective murder. It is not that I hate it. I love it. I love it very much. But I love it against my better judgment. It's a land that God, if he exists, has created in anger.